On January 6, 2021, there was a police officer dying, another 4 officers dying by suicide, with at least 140 police officers being injured.
On the fifth anniversary of January 6, 2021, discussion centered on the investigation into President Trump's efforts to overturn the 2020 election. The focus highlighted evidence showing that the violence at the Capitol was foreseeable, and it examined claims made by a White House website attempting to recast the events of that day and the investigation itself.
On January 6, 2026, the 5th anniversary of the insurrection, the White House launched a taxpayer-funded website that attempts to rewrite history about what happened on that day of infamy. On January 6, 2021, there was an insurrection at the United States Capitol that resulted in a police officer dying the next day, another 4 officers dying by suicide in the months thereafter, with at least 140 police officers being injured by the insurrectionists, with 15 of them requiring hospitalization. And I'm proud that we have 4 former officers as well as on-duty Capitol Hill police officers here today. Mr. Smith, I want to ask you about this website because the Trump administration is using taxpayer dollars to lie to the American people about the events leading up to and the events taking place on January 6, 2021. For example, this Trump propaganda site claims that the 2020 election was, quote, stolen. Mr. Smith, did your investigation uncover evidence sufficient to prove beyond a reasonable doubt that Donald Trump knew that his claim that the election was stolen was false?
Yes, it did.
And did your investigation uncover evidence sufficient to prove beyond a reasonable doubt that Donald Trump publicly claimed that the 2020 election was stolen from him while he privately acknowledged that he had lost the election?
Yes, we cited instances of that during in our case.
But yet here we see that on the 5th anniversary of the insurrection, the Trump White House propaganda machine is still promoting the stolen election theory on this government webpage with a text box titled, quote, fraudulent election, stolen election certified, end quote. The site also has a subsection reading in part, quote, FBI entrapment operation exposed. Mr. Smith, did your investigation develop any evidence to support the allegation that the FBI entrapped insurrectionists into committing crimes on January 6th?
Our investigation revealed that Donald Trump is the person who caused January 6th, that it was foreseeable to him, and that he sought to exploit the violence.
This website also accuses you of being a, quote, Biden prosecutor who brought, quote, weaponized charges against Mr. Trump. Mr. Smith, were you a Biden prosecutor who weaponized the Department of Justice against Donald Trump?
Absolutely not.
Did Attorney General Merrick Garland direct you to prosecute Trump because Donald Trump was running against Joe Biden in the presidential election?
No.
There are also allegations that President Trump was the victim of, quote, lawfare, and accusations that the Department of Justice lawyers who prosecuted Donald Trump used, quote, fabricated indictments and rigged show trials. Did you, Mr. Smith, or the men and women working on your team work to fabricate indictments or put on rigged show trials?
No, we secured indictments from grand juries, and we were prepared to prove our case in court beyond a reasonable doubt.
Did you use your appointment as special counsel to conduct a politically motivated witch hunt, scam investigation, and prosecution of Donald Trump?
I did not. We followed the facts and we followed the law. Where that led us was to an indictment of an unprecedented criminal scheme to block the peaceful transfer of power.
And those indictments have been dismissed. Can they be re-brought or resurrected after Trump leaves office?
They were dismissed without prejudice.
So they can be refiled,
Uh,
and he can be prosecuted after he leaves office. Is that correct?
I'm not going to speak to that. I can only speak to what we did, which was dismiss the case without prejudice.
All right. The website put out by the Trump White House on the anniversary of January 6th is nothing more than a pack of lies. It proves that Donald Trump is hell-bent on misusing taxpayer dollars in a feeble attempt to rewrite his criminal history and the history of what happened on January 6, 2021. And with that, I yield back.
The conversation underscores a stark reality. January 6, 2021, was not an isolated or accidental event, but a deliberate and foreseeable attempt to disrupt the peaceful transfer of power. The investigation revealed that President Trump repeatedly promoted false claims that the 2020 election had been stolen, while privately acknowledging that he had lost. Multiple trusted advisors, campaign officials, and state Republican authorities informed him that his claims were false, yet these warnings were ignored or rejected. This pattern shows that the false claims were not a misunderstanding. They were intentionally propagated to maintain political power, even as the consequences became increasingly dangerous. The use of a taxpayer-funded White House website to promote the stolen election narrative and allege FBI entrapment illustrates how the rewriting of history continues. The site contains false assertions that the prosecution of Trump was politically motivated or weaponized, and attempts to cast January 6th as a fabricated or exaggerated event. These claims are contradicted by the documented findings of the investigation, which included sworn testimony, grand jury evidence, and corroborated accounts from witnesses who risked political and personal consequences to provide the truth. The contrast between the investigative record and the website's messaging highlights the ongoing tension between fact and propaganda in shaping public perception. The evidence demonstrates that Trump's actions were calculated. He selectively embraced information that supported his objective of remaining in office, even if it was implausible or false, and disregarded evidence that contradicted his desired outcome. The investigation further found that the resulting violence at the Capitol was foreseeable, and that Trump exploited it to pressure Congress and further his political objectives. Assertions that January 6th was the result of FBI manipulation or other outside forces are contradicted by clear evidence showing that the instigation originated from the actions and rhetoric promoted by Trump himself. The questioning also addresses claims that the investigation was politically motivated. Prosecutorial decisions were guided by facts, law, and the federal interest. Grand juries reviewed the evidence and authorized indictments based on the merits of the case. There was no instruction from the Attorney General to pursue a partisan outcome, and the team did not fabricate charges or conduct show trials. Cases that were dismissed were done so without prejudice, which preserves the possibility of future legal proceedings. These procedural facts demonstrate that the investigation was consistent with legal standards rather than partisan objectives. Another important dimension is the human cost of January 6th. Over 140 officers were injured, some seriously, with multiple deaths linked directly or indirectly to the events. The website's attempt to recast the events undermines the lived experiences of those who defended the Capitol and risked their lives. It also undermines trust in democratic institutions by presenting a false narrative as official history. The testimonies of witnesses who placed their allegiance to truth and country above party demonstrate the essential role of integrity in upholding democracy. These accounts provide powerful evidence that the claims of election fraud were knowingly false. This discussion makes clear that the facts of January 6th, the actions of the president, and the investigative record cannot be ignored or erased. Misrepresenting those events through official channels damages public trust and risks weakening the mechanisms that ensure accountability. The evidence collected shows deliberate falsehoods, foreseeable violence, and the exploitation of political power. Recognizing these facts is essential to understanding the events of January 6th, protecting democratic institutions, and ensuring that public resources are not used to perpetuate false narratives.